So apparently former Christian Kanye is admitting to having intimate relations, to say the least, with cousins growing up. And then you got people like Project Pat, formerly working with 3-6 Mafia Drake, now working with No Big Deal and proudly proclaiming Christ. It seems like there is this shaking amongst the hip hop community and seemingly chaos coming from this world as someone as big and global as Kanye West is coming off with some absurd statements. I'll heal her. They don't understand the things I say on Twitter. But one thing that we know about history of culture and arts is that periods of instability or chaos lead often to a change or an emergence of bold, unconventional counterculture movements. Shawn, do you think that we are witnessing with our own eyes a new renaissance for the Christian hip-hop movement?
I mean, undoubtedly. I've always said that if you want to be countercultural, be a Christian. You know what I'm saying? But like, even in the sense of which that we're in the world now, oh yeah, like just from everything that's been going on from, I mean, not just that, but just like the state of the world that we're in now. Like, it's just, I feel like it's high time for some type of innovation, and not just like innovation like in a technology sense, but like in the sense of just general culture mindset and stuff like that.
So I pondered on this thought after hearing this quote from Kato on the Track, who recently worked with No Big Deal on his recent song just a matter of days ago called Never Going Back, which Kato is not known for being a Christian. Could he be? Maybe that's between him and the Lord, but he previously has worked with people such as Snoop Dogg, Jack Harlow, people who don't proclaim Christ. And he doesn't necessarily proclaim Christ. If you look on his stuff, there's no fruits of spirit or anything of that sort. So, but I don't know his heart. But he tweeted this out. If I'm being honest, I got kind of burnt out on music that had no substance or lyricism. And that's why I started working with a lot of Christian artists recently, wanting to bring the Kato signature sound to artists with a all caps positive message. Y'all are showing the real impact. Y'all are showing us the impact is real. And it has had 100,000 streams just in 2 days alone. So you have someone like Kato, who is apparently a non-believer, seeing the impact of working. Let's not go theological here. He's just working with something that he believes has substance. He believes it has purpose. Someone like Project Pat, he claims that he used to be on that foolery, and now he is focusing on Christ. He is putting away his sins, never going back, not listening to the trickery of the devil. And you can see all this in his lyrics and his testimony in the recent song with No Big Deal, Never Going Back. But you see this conglomerate, whether it's explicit Christian, explicitly known as being a Christian, such as No Big Deal, someone who might be new to the faith, such as Project Pat, but then even someone from the secular world who says there is something here. There's something going on here. To where, in contrast, you pull up maybe the biggest name in hip hop over the last 20, 25 years in Mr. West himself, who you and I have known this. We've been following him for a long time. I mean, in the early 2000s when, he claimed George Bush was racist and a lot of our problems for the war going on. He's built a career off of being absurd. Now, he's also built a career off of being a music genius.
Yeah.
But has it shifted to where he's a little bit crazy, a little bit absurd, but his music is great, to where now his music is going down, it's losing substance, so then therefore the absurdity has to go further. And this has happened culturally time and time again throughout history, to where we see when culture begins to unravel, the absurdities go up, and then eventually it leads into deconstruction. Do you see this happening?
I would say so. I'm no, historian or anything like that, no expert whatsoever in cultural decay. But if I have to stand on God's word and what it says and, the signs of showing, what cultural decay looks like, I definitely think that I've seen just in the course of, like the last 5-10 years of my lifetime as like a grown adult that's like conscious and aware of like things going on, and just like even friends like who are, you know, part of some cultural like ideologies, or not just like LGBTQ, but like, you know, you like just like anything else in the cultural realm. It's like, you know, I have seen that decay. I have seen that sort of, you know, the loss of meaning. Mostly blame that on the quick access to information we have with social media and just our devices in general. It's just like, you know, we have infinite amounts of information, but it's like, to what extent does that information now mean anything? Because everyone has access to this information, not just like encyclopedia information, but, you know, anything you can research or Google or, you know, find a course on YouTube for. It's like we all now have access relatively to the same things, and it's just becoming a lot more homogenous in that sense. But yeah, and then on top of that, there is that spiritual decay that's like furthering that whole thing. And, you know, it's sad to see an artist like Kanye just keep ramping up that whole thing, especially after proclaiming Christ. And then now we're, you know, witnessing some live tweets that are insane, like having relations with his cousins and then, explicitly, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, not even like some like trying to beat around the bush and like trying to sugarcoat what he was saying, but like
he's being nasty. He's being
really nasty, really gross. So yeah, that's we definitely see it, and I feel like if you say you can't see it, you're either you're lying or you're blind to the reality that's around us. Because it's like, man, like I don't even think it takes to be a Christian to like be like, yeah, I feel like in general there's no substance really in the world. I mean, there's never truly been, but it's that sense that all the facade is coming down, and there's not a lot left to really grasp for saying it's of substance.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, and I don't think you find this with all rappers who are out there, but I think that they definitely look to people such as Kanye. I mean, think of people like Lil Nas X, I mean, who's made his platform off of being controversial. You know, some people, they say they don't even know if he's really like in the LGBTQ, you know, circles. He's just proclaiming it just to get more attention. And I was talking to Abel, my son, about wrestling, and I revealed to him that, you know, what you see the wrestlers do, that's genuine. Like they're hitting up and whatever on each other, but it's all part of a story. I didn't want to be so quick to say it's fake, because he immediately said, so what I'm seeing is not real. And I said, well, what you're seeing might be real. Like what you actually see is genuinely happening, but it's a part of a persona that people take. And that continued to like hit me. I was like, but honestly, son, that's like most people in the spotlight. That's most people who have, I mean, and not all of it's even bad. I mean, I think of someone like Dolly Parton, who her hair is not legitimately hers. Like apparently she might be like brunette or something underneath. And her husband was very much like out of the spotlight. And when she went out to be Dolly Parton, you saw her in a way. And then she wanted to live a regular life of faith and faithfulness to her husband and living in Tennessee. And she was a businesswoman. Like, so I'm like, that's not really always a bad thing. If I'm going to be out here, then okay, cool. You look at this persona, there's this image, and then I'm going to go over here, be somewhere else. I've even talked to awesome people in the Christian circles to where they've said that they have had to do the same thing. They're like, I don't put my family out there. I don't want any of my like actual business. There was a popular comedian even who he told me one time, he's like, I'm never going to post this on social media, but I'm a guy who just likes to like smoke ribs, and that's who I really am. But you're not going to see that side of me, because people only want to see and want to know this persona. So having a persona is not bad, I think, especially with information age that you're talking about, to where we need to know everything about you. But I do think that if we use said persona as a mask to glorify debauchery or wickedness, or to gain attention in a negative light, I do think that is to be in question. And someone like Kanye has been historically known. All right, what can he say that's going to be more controversial? And he continues to push the limits. At one point, he says that, you know, he calls himself Jesus, that he is, I am a god, in his own songs, using controversial titles such as Black Skinhead. So then, hey, I'm not even gonna have an album cover, or I'm gonna have an album cover that has explicit content on it. to then, he makes the images of him in a bed with Donald Trump and Taylor Swift. He's always doing something. To then he marries a Kardashian, to where now he's a Christian. It just kind of, at
Right.
that point in time, it felt like once again it was Kanye trying to be controversial. To then, now I'm a Nazi and Hitler was right and the Jews were wrong. And to where now, what could he potentially say that's going to go even further? I never told y'all this about my past, but me and my cousin, like, yeah, that was a thing. Like, what? I can't even
Brother.
tell you a song that he's like given that's been actually good in so long, but I can tell you all these crazy storylines.
Right, right. I mean, that's the thing too. Is like you're absolutely right because, like, as someone I mean, we're talking about the same mind that made 808's Heartbreaks, Graduation, all the college dropout sequenced albums. Like, such wonderful music. I mean, profanity aside, I mean, if you're digging into the substance of the music, it was actually there was some substantial like essence to it. Somewhat conscious. Has some cheeky one-liners here and there. But like there was some sense of that. But then you progress into just everything he was going through. Like, I mean, his mental breakdowns, everything like that. And it's like you said, like most of his music now has not even been memorable or of substance. Like aside from like the Jesus is King project, where there was substance, there was something there. We all kind of were like, well, where's this gonna go? Is it gonna like is it gonna pivot into like a whole new era for him to like release great music, or is it gonna like pivot into something different or weird or worse? And unfortunately, it's been going into that direction. With the unreleased, or I guess it's released but not officially, Project Bully, and then of course Donda, which was dedicated to his late mother, which had some songs that were good, but it's still like nothing has been of substance as compared to his previous projects. Post all the craziness that he's been spewing out over the internet and all that, and it's just it sucks to again witness and watch that in real time, but it does leave room for people who are interested in seeing culture revitalized, and to like bring good music back, or just art in general back, not just for art's sake, but maybe something deeper, maybe something more profound, maybe even something that has it pertains to our Lord. That's the hope anyway.
Francis Schaeffer has been talking about this for, I mean, he was much bigger in the 70s and 80s, but if you go back and you study up on the philosophical approaches that Schaeffer had understanding culture, I think he nails it. And he addresses these movements that have taken place over cultural periods of time, to where when we begin lacking substance, when we begin lacking in meaning of what we are doing, the only way that the world can compensate is by being absurd. This is Schaeffer's language, is that they have to go into the absurdity in order to stay relevant. We have to say that there's purpose or meaning behind what I'm doing and who I am and what the crazy things that come out of my mouth are. And then therefore that gives it substance or purpose. For example, no one is going to listen to Kanye's song about cousins. I can't even believe I'm not even trying to promote it, but I think it's worth exploring, because there's going to be someone who's going to be going upon it, and they're going to give it substance based off of just because Kanye said it. And Schaeffer talks about this, and he talks about the absurdity and how when creatives only hold on to the absurdity because they don't have true substance, it will eventually lead to deconstruction. And I think we have to make note of that. And it's going to force us into one of two paths. We either go into this, postmodern, nihilistic approach to where life has no meaning, there is no purpose, no point to it all. No one wants to stay there. So that's where we go into postmodern. Well, it is just whatever I think it is. Or I can be whatever I want to be, and I define meaning and truth. Or it pushes us in the other direction, and we long for real substance, real food, real meaning. And I'm wondering if we are witnessing that with people who have been around for a while, and they've been giving us trash, and they are now going into the absurdity, and we are now seeing with music being probably the most popular form of art of our era, to where it's getting absurd, it's getting ridiculous, it's losing its substance, its meaning, to where it's forcing us to look at the Christians. And No Big Deal's been saying this for a while now, is that the Christians got it. The Renaissance is here because the Christians are going to be the ones bringing this food to the table.
Right, right. And we see it happening in real time. That's a really cool thing to witness. Like all these, like, from the events to, the music itself to even the promo around the music.
This is not Rob Bell. We about to rob hell.
Like the graphics or anything, I see people who, like, it catches their eye, or they Spotify recommends them to them or whatever, and it's like, and they may or may not even be a believer, but it's like, there is this trend of, like, now there's like we've been talking about, this interest in the spiritual interests, particularly in Christianity, where because we're actually able to communicate and talk about things that are not just like meaningful, it's like hashtag fake deep or something, but it's like we genuinely are coming to you with relatability, vulnerability, and the means in which your life can be transformed indefinitely. Like it's something that's giving you all of that. If a song from anyone else, like in the secular space, came out with one of those aspects, right? It tends to do well, so to speak. It promises this euphoric experience when you get to the drop, or it relate to this person's story, or all those things individually. But when it all culminates in together, and it actually delivers on all three of those things, we're presenting the gospel through that. And that to me is where that power is lying in. Namely, we're seeing like massive, like, cultural or Christian cultural events like popping up, and they have a ton of interest, and a ton of people are flocking to them, and they're relatively low budget, relatively not the most glamorous things ever, but there's just this hunger you see that Christians and non-Christians alike are coming to those spaces to be a part. I'm thinking of like No Big Deals, like even his Unplugged event, or their Indie Tribes annual Holy Smoke, or some of the local events I've been involved with in like the DMV district, or DC, Maryland, Virginia area. Joyful Noise with Bryce, like, just seeing all these things are like they're happening, and that there's genuine interest in them. If this same thing were to happen, like these events were to happen, let's say like 15 years ago, I don't think there would have been the same level of interest or intrigue. They would just been like, kind of like, still cool things, I'm sure, but just like little pop-ups that just kind of happened and then fizzled out. But it's kind of like what the Jewish leaders were saying about the apostles, is like, should we kill them now? And then they were like, well, no, because let's let God decide. If it's truly from God, it will grow, and it will do its, it will be something of notice. But if they're not from God, then it will be over before it even starts, sort of thing. So that's kind of like a scripture that's coming to my mind right now, of like the example of, how we're seeing that resurgence, and how No Big Deal is exactly right. The Christians got it. It's that Renaissance is coming through, how it's the Lord's using his body to minister to the nations. Like that's the prophecy that we've all heard in the Bible, but like we're thinking it's like going to be this like super like, spiritual thing. The clouds open up, boom, then, all this, but it's like, how about like God's just using people who can leverage social media well, and actually like give people hope through those channels? Like we're actually witnessing that in real time, but because people may not subscribe to the Christians being in the arts, that they're missing out on what's happening.
Well, and even if you look at, you might get pushback and you say, well, over the last year, rap had a big year. I think the headlining tag would be, the Kendrick versus Drake battle. That was probably the biggest moment of the year. Maybe, goodness, maybe the last decade. That's how big it was. And then going over to the Super Bowl. But let's just use that as an example to continue Schaeffer's point. I'm not saying Kendrick is where Kanye is now, but is Not Like Us as big of a song if it doesn't have a spectacular factor? Our bars are good, is there a deeper meaning, truth, whatever, sure. But most of it is the drama that comes beyond the art. that makes the art bigger. And this is what I'm talking about with this spectrum of absurdity or spectacularness. You could put them in the same category. If it's beneficial for the art, you could say it's more spectacular, and then more ridiculous it gets, it's more absurd. And I think Kanye has shown that he can do both. Kendrick, for example, if there's not the controversies of Samuel L. Jackson being Uncle Sam and being counterculture and pushing the gossip between him and Drake's beef and all this stuff, is it as big? Is the art as beautiful and spectacular? And I would say we got to use those examples to display and show that even something like that. I mean, Kendrick has been known for being huge in the rap community, but not as big in the mainstream community until this spectacular stuff has happened, until this drama has happened. Most people couldn't even tell you a Kendrick song. They're like, oh, I've heard of his name. I know he's big, but I really don't know why. It's more it's his own subculture group. Same with J. Cole, kind of has a similar reputation, versus a Drake who is known for having big pop hits and known for, his glamorous lifestyle. And that goes into the spectacular or the absurdity that Schaeffer's talking about. But on the dangerous side, where it goes even further on the spectrum, is you get a Kanye to when your talent, it might not even be there anymore, man. You may have ran out of the juice, So the only thing you got is absurdity. Right. And it's to be controversial or to be ridiculous or to make these claims. And Schaeffer says that we can look at culture and we can look at what's going on in the arts to say what's actually going on within our own hearts. Is that if we are not latching on to essential truths, gospel redemption of Christ has been made restored to us for anyone who has put their faith into him and follows him. If we don't understand that truth and understand that substance, then we're going to also go into the absurdity, and that will eventually spiral us into chaos. And then there's been people in the past who will say that's where we ought to be and we ought to go to that nihilistic approach. People like Jackson Pollock have gone through that everything is just random or chance and, it's up to the universe, essentially. It's not of God. But Schaeffer would give pushback to a Jackson Pollock or a John Cage who has a whole orchestra number of no sound, no music, and everyone applause, because it's so ridiculous. And he would say you can only do that in a world with order, in a world that is clearly designed and with purpose. Only in that world can you even say that there's no purpose or that there is chaos, to make that comparison.
Right. No, and totally. Yeah. It's the truth, because you're either with the grain or you're against the grain. And not the sense that cultural, countercultural, none of that, but the grain of the design of the creator. And, he didn't just create the way gravity works, right? He also has orchestrated human interactions, and he's called what is good between humans and what's bad. So it's from that alone, when we as humans start to detract from the standards of whatever the expectations are on whatever medium we're in. Take the Cage example. Not that God literally has predestined how a good symphony ought to sound or anything like that, but there is a sense in which Cage is deliberately going against the expectation of how human perception, relationships, and relationships to art particularly is realized in a given product exchange relationship. I think that was his whole point with that. It was to show you're willing to tolerate music on it, and it's a complete absurdness when it's presented to you as prestigious or whatever. But there is a sense where, God has established an order, and it is apparent because humans feel it. We feel that there is this, there's an expectations being set. And then when those things don't happen, we're like, what gives? And if we were just ones and zeros in the universe, or nothing really mattered and it's all random, it's then truly we shouldn't even have a sense of expectation. That's just, it doesn't in a completely, what's the word? It's doesn't matter, I guess, but in a completely random world, humans shouldn't have the ability to have reason or logic or expectations of any sort. So just the fact that we have it alone is a proof, as you're kind of getting at with Schaeffer's example in his regard of what he was saying.
And I think that we can see that there is this shift. There is this longing for it, because Kanye stating that he's being intimate with his cousin, as ridiculous as that sounds, Schaeffer would say that this spectacle-driven disconnection from the actual art that he's trying to create is a poor substitute for the art that is rooted in an understanding actual order design presented by Christ. No Big Deal, on the other hand, is saying, let's use all of it, put it together as an offering. Let's put good music, good lyrics, Christ-centered meaning. And we're even going to invite people who have been redeemed and restored into the party. That has meaning. That has purpose. And that's what someone like Cato admires and says, I would much rather be a part of that.
Yeah, which is amazing to see that fruit in itself, is that the art, more or less is speaking for itself. We don't have to have additional voices around the art to continue its absurdity. It's just the art stands alone.
It's crazy to watch. I'm excited to see how Christians are going to continue to capitalize. And that's my prayer, is that they do, is that they don't give in and feel like they need to do, something okay, what did the world do? And I just need to copy and paste that. No, be faithful, brother. Now, you might like music. You might have music a certain way. You might have been raised on a certain type of sound. That's perfectly fine. You can bring that influence. Influence, sure. Didn't the gospel writers bring their influence, their cultural backgrounds and influence into writing? Matthew, being a Jew, bringing in his genealogies and his history and his traditions into his writings. John, being the beloved, making a more relational approach, talking about how he saw Jesus, and this is Jesus through his lens. And then you have other writers, Luke, who being a historian, wanting to make sure his facts and figures are right. Okay, that's perfectly fine. Add your flavor, add your tone, your taste to it. But what's the purpose? What's the meaning? What are we really trying to make here? And I think that's what Christ is really all about. And I think if you pull it out, if you pull Jesus out, this whole mix, I think it's a testimony in and of itself that if we don't have truth, the absurdity will lead us into destruction.